Anyway, welcome everyone to the Small Firm Forum, and I'm going to let Gwen Sloan introduce herself from Cambium. But please give her a warm welcome. And sorry we had to do it all virtually, but can't control the fire department. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Gwen, and I work with a company called Cambium. And I'm here today to talk about climate craft and circularity in architecture, and specifically how to specify wood sustainably. If we were in person, I would start by asking us all to kind of connect with each other, because as much as I'm a resource in rebuilding sustainable wood supply chains, you are all also resources for each other in big ways and probably have a lot of local knowledge. But since we're online, I'll just let you speak on your own outside of this, I suppose, and you meet regularly anyway. But yeah, what I'm really going to be talking about today is rebuilding wood supply chains for impact and what that looks like here in the US. I have a background in landscape design and installation specifically, and then also as an environmental organizer. And so my kind of lens here is very much from sustainability, from nature and ecological principles, and how to move forward as a society with circularity and building with nature. And my current role is as West Coast Millwork Manager for Cambium. And what that means is, we have a whole supply side of our organization, and then we have a whole distribution side. And so it's my job to kind of educate and work with builders and architects to specify sustainable domestic lumber. So what we do here at Cambium is we give life to trees that otherwise would have gone to waste. And there are numerous trees that fall every year in the US. In cities alone, about 36 million trees fall every year. It's a lot of lumber. Um, this, are some images here. I was visiting a mill up in Vallejo, and they had a whole lot that was just trees that local arborists had dropped off. And they, held them for a long time, made tables out of some of them, but eventually, someone bought the lot and they ended up just wood chipping all of this wood. And that's kind of what happens to about 90% of the fallen lumber in US cities is it's wood chipped or burned. Sometimes it's even landfilled. And when it's landfilled, that's a huge cost to cities, about 973 million in 2018. So what are the sources of, wood waste in the US? Deconstruction is one of them. Pest-driven. So I don't know if you've heard of the emerald ash borer, but on the East Coast, we have a pest that targets ash trees, kind of kills them, and then we have these standing dead ash trees. Fuel load reduction, we work with communities who are trying to prepare or mitigate fire in their regions, and then post-burn and disaster wood. So, Hurricane Helene down south took out a lot of trees, and how can we work with the local community to collect those so they don't get wasted? So that's really what we're doing, is we're giving new life to these trees. And fallen trees, that 36 million in cities alone equates to about $40 billion in usable lumber. That's not insignificant. So $40 billion of lumber is about 3.5 times more than we imported last year. And so there's a real world scenario here where we can replace, our imports with domestic wood. And of course, there's some species discrepancy there. We're not, Ipe is not falling in the US, but there is a lot of wood here that is going to waste that we can get back into the supply chain. So we're talking about, imported woods. There's a lot of wood that comes from far away. But if shipping was a country, it would be the sixth largest greenhouse gas emitter. So one of the things that we really focus on is the domestic supply chain. Some examples of other, quote unquote, sustainable lumber. I don't know if any of you have worked with or spec'd Kebony or Koya or Luna wood. But, for some of these products, the trees are being grown in New Zealand. They're being shipped to Scandinavia, where they're being modified, and then they're being shipped to the US. Thermery is a thermally modified wood brand in the US. their wood comes from here, is shipped to Estonia to be modified, and then shipped back to the US. And so even these like other quote unquote, sustainable options are often traveling millions of miles before or they get to you. Or hundreds of miles, yeah, hundreds of thousands of miles. Um, so we really believe that sustainability starts with supply chains, and that's where we work. Also, I'm not looking at the chat, so if anyone has a question, you can shout it out. I just saw that there was a question there. But yeah, our supply chain starts by collecting fallen trees. Then we kind of have full chain of custody throughout this process. And so we purchase those trees, we send them to a partner sawmill. We put them through profiling, tongue and groove, shiplap. Sometimes we thermally modify them, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then we work with architects and builders to get them back into the built environment. We're 1% for the planet, and so we try and give back where we can as well. Yeah, so wood, comes from all over the country. We have a lot up in the Pacific Northwest, obviously, and maybe we're getting some southern yellow pine from down here. There's just not a lot of trees in this central corridor, in Nevada as well. Yeah, this is that wood, the mill up in Vallejo that I was speaking about. His name is Lloyd. He works up there. And gets all of his lumber that he uses for his furniture making company from local arborists, and they drop them off on his site. He assesses them, mills them, and turns them into goods. And I think that's just a really beautiful example of circularity at a really local level. And I'm sure there's a lot of other mills around here doing similar work. So we're just kind of doing that, but on a massive, like nationwide scale. One of the really cool things about how we're able to track this is we can tag a log when it comes down, watch it through its entire kind of supply chain from transportation to milling to drying to thermally modifying, and then say, okay, this deck came from trees that were here, here, and here from, storm damage in Helene or something like that. Here's a visual representation of what that could look like. So, we can find the tree, we can track the source, the transportation, the travel, and the destination. We can also track, carbon emitted through that process, and kind of what, carbon avoided too, if there was, another option. This brings us better data into our projects. And so if you're working on anything that is LEED certified or green building certified and you need that data in your work, we can help to make that, much easier for you. And then every board like really tells a story. And so I think as we're thinking about, the buildings we're building, whether they're homes or public spaces, it's not just like, hey, yep, this is wood. It's like, okay, this is wood that is salvaged and otherwise would have gone to waste. And we've, pulled that into our home here and it has a story. You can also, talk about a little bit of the carbon embodied in the wood itself of oftentimes if it's wood chipped or burned, that carbon is being re-released back into the atmosphere. But if it's staying in its wood form, then that carbon is being stored in that piece of lumber. And you can compare that kind of stored carbon to, other traditionally harvest woods or plastic composites in terms of like an avoided carbon release. Yeah, so I think when we're talking about, local supply chains, domestic supply chains, we're talking about cutting emissions. When we're minimizing these transportation distances, we're also talking about kind of reshoring manufacturing jobs because we're not sending them overseas to be modified or profiled. All of that is happening here with, a partner network that's as local as possible to the place where the tree came down and where the final project is being installed. We're diverting waste from the waste streams and we're reinvesting in communities to protect our forests. So, as we were growing, we were trying to think about how to really bring salvaged lumber and wood to market. And something that we felt would be helpful there was to establish a wood brand. Um, because, when you say salvage, people usually think used to be a boat, used to be a barn. But this wood is still most of the time virgin lumber. It just came down from for another reason. And so we came up with the term carbon smart wood. And the definition there is sourced from trees that otherwise would have gone unused due to factors like death, disease, disaster, development, restorative forest management. And we're trying to just ensure optimal use of these resources. So, once these trees come down, they go through this process, they can, fit into a number of different applications. Wood is extremely versatile. Um, we can make furniture with this wood. We can do interior and exterior millwork, which is where I'm assuming most of you work. Mass timber is another, huge opportunity that I think we're going to see a lot of in the next few years. And that's, replacing these big steel kind of structural aspects with cross-laminated timbers and panels, and then obviously rough sawn and nominal lumber as well. We've had some pretty large success with um, big brands choosing to use salvage lumber and carbon smart wood. These are some of our partners and people we work with on a regular basis. So there is kind of a lot of momentum around using salvage lumber here in the US. Um, in the furniture side, we've worked with Room and Board. This is one of our projects with them. Steelcase, Microsoft, Patagonia. Yeah, there's like real recognition and momentum behind this. On the cross-laminated timber side, I think we're going to see this probably most often used in data centers, but there's also been some really beautiful work on college campuses and yeah, schools of environmental design, stuff like that. It's a really great way to use a wood that doesn't really have a lot of other usages or isn't very high value. And so that's like southern yellow pine, maybe isn't used in a ton of building applications, not a very high value wood, but we can get a ton of value out of it by removing it from the waste stream and bringing it back into cross-laminated CLT. This is, yeah, an example of CLT that we kind of did as an art project. We built this giant campfire to just kind of exhibit what CLT could look like and feel like for folks. Um, But yeah, we're really trying to make it as easy as possible for people to use salvage lumber. And one way of doing that is making it look and feel like all of the lumber you're already using. So, for decking, fencing, stuff like that, we have hidden fastener, kind of your standard dimensions. Same thing for siding, tongue and groove, shiplap. Um, and we feel that the more that our products can resemble what's already on the market, the easier it will be to replace the system of harvested lumber with the system of salvage lumber and circularity. So we never leverage, nationwide, but like local. I don't know if you've heard the term like global, but it's just like, we're working in a distributed model with lots of local partners to fulfill orders, but we're doing that at a national level. These are some of, yeah, the most popular salvage wood products I've seen out there. Something that I get really excited to talk about are the thermally modified options, as well as the edge green flooring stuff, because I think it's really unique. Um, Thermal modification is this process and innovation using only heat and steam that changes the cellular structure of the wood. And thermally modified wood, it kind of goes in the kiln at a higher heat. It burns out all of the sugars, all the sucrose, and so it's going to be more pest resistant, more rot resistant. And it also kind of collapses the cell structure and makes it a little bit hydrophobic or like water resistant. And so the water will kind of just, it'll still sink through, but it'll sink straight through the cell structure and won't kind of hold in the wood itself. But it, yeah, gives it a lot more longevity. especially in outdoor settings. And this process, yeah, is chemical free. It increases stability, and so you're going to get less cupping or bending. It can also enhance the appearance with a darker color tone, and it becomes more decay resistant. So this is a really cool innovation that makes it easier to bring all the salvage lumber to market. This is a photo of that thermally modified wood right after it was installed on a deck. I don't think it rained. I think they just sprayed it down, but you can see without any finish, like just how that thermal modification process can really make it kind of hydrophobic. The water is like pooling up on top. Like any wood, salvage lumber, thermally modified lumber, is going to weather and gray out. So something that I always share with architects is if you're doing a rendering for a client, we're going to want to maybe give them one rendering of what it looks like when it's going to be installed and one when it's fully weathered, unless you're planning to do, you know, some maintenance and continually finishing it. And you can also see a little bit of uneven weathering pattern here. And so where the overhang is, it gets a little bit more shade or less sun. And so that's going to like take it longer to weather there. I wanted to give a little bit of a case study here. This was a situation where someone was building on a large site and they had to take down trees to build a golf course and a large kind of like country club for people to hang out in. And they were like, oh, we think we're gonna have to take down, 200, 300 trees to make this work. Like, what can we do here? And so we came in and we helped them do an assessment of their site. We identified 8 species of trees that could be used in their final building process. That resulted in about 38,000 board feet of salvage wood that was then able to be used in that final construction of their country club. So they saved about, $200,000 there by using the wood on site and having that be a fully circular process. So we came in, identified the trees, helped them go through the milling and profiling process, and then we're able to bring them back on site for construction. Um, this is an example of the edge green flooring that I was talking about a little bit earlier. This is the Portland Airport in their international wing. And the edge green flooring basically is, when you're cutting, you're working in the shop, there are often all of these pieces that end up on the shop floor. And so we created a project with Xena Tile that kind of puts them together and has a wire backing, and you get this really beautiful floor tile that's extremely um, holds up really well in commercial circumstances, can take a lot of people walking on it every day. And that's kind of a double salvage product because it's salvaged in the beginning from, trees that otherwise would have gone to waste, but then it's also using the waste materials that would usually end up on the floor. Donald, do you have a question?
Uh, Excuse me, yes, I do. This is very interesting. When lumber is used in a building, it has different rating characteristics, okay, given the particular strength and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you're taking wood and redoing it, are you also categorizing the wood in those ways?
Can you define the rating characteristics a little
Well,
bit
it might
more?
be select structural, it might be number one, number
Sure.
two.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. So we use mostly number one for if we're doing siding or if we're doing decking, anything like that. We do have like number two and below for for fencing, and that's a great way to bring in materials that are maybe have an unstable knot or something like that that could pop out or a small like crack or something like that. So we're never going to give that to someone as siding or decking, but we might sell that for a lower cost as a fencing material. Um, because of our milling process, and I'll get into that a little bit later too, we do something called plane sawing. And so you're not going to be able to get like clear cedar or quarter sawn. You're going to have to be comfortable with a little bit more character in the wood. And again, I'll dive into that a little bit later with some imagery if that's all right. All right, cool. And I can't see all of you, so if anyone else has a question, just feel free to unmute and I will answer.
I have a question as far as this thermal modified wood.
Sure.
And that is that I'm looking online as to this. What I'm not seeing is rot resistance, is like dry rot.
Yeah. So I think I haven't looked at dry
Or
rot
risk of
specifically, but the fungal resistant definitely is there. So when you're burning out the sucrose and you're making it more hydrophobic, there's nothing there in the same way for the fungus to eat. Because there's the sugars, the decomposition isn't happening in the same way. So it no longer contains the sufficient nutrients to feed the fungus.
Okay, because the reason I'm bringing this up is that in the city of Berkeley, we have a unique situation because of a deck that collapsed, killed a bunch of Irish kids. And the city of Berkeley went a little off the rails in that they went and changed the building code that goes and states that any deck that is exposed to the weather, that it is required to be either pressure treated or naturally durable wood. And there's no definition as what naturally durable wood means.
Yeah.
There's no one's defined that. And the problem, and that creates a problem if you have to put a waterproofing membrane on top of it. And so it's a situation of where you can't put waterproofing on top of pressure treated because of the chemicals will cause it to delaminate and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And so the thing is whether is that this is a great idea if it worked in that fashion.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing is that maybe not. And does this change as far as different species of wood as far as this fungal attack aspect?
That's a great question. I don't know if it has gone through that Berkeley code specifically, but I can say that it is a decay resistant wood in the sense that
the city of Berkeley is not that sophisticated.
Right. Like I can't speak to that specifically.
They just changed the building code and then presumed that everyone else is going to figure it out. And so they have no clue.
There was another impact of that because for many, many years in the old days, if you did a deck, you cantilevered the floor joists. And this law pretty much made that impossible because that means that all your floor joists inside the house had to be this treated material. So now, and the one that collapsed was of that type.
Yeah, we recommend doing like a joist tape underneath the wood so that, even though the water might kind of come through the thermally modified wood, not sit in the cell structure, that doesn't mean that, if you're building the joist underneath it with something else, that is going to be as decay resistant. So we recommend, joist tape so that when the water comes through, it doesn't sit there. We also offer a 25-year warranty on all of the thermally modified wood. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of like time scale. It's still a natural product. It's going to age, but it's, it's not plastic. But yeah, it definitely is more decay resistant, pest resistant, rot resistant.
If I could jump in real quickly, I think it's not the city of Berkeley that defines what decay resistant is or is not. It's defined in the California Building Code. So if you're using that for structural purposes like joists on decking, I assume that your products have the rating and testing that satisfies the building codes, right? Or
it's mostly been used as the top, not necessarily the joist, so I'm not positive about that.
Okay, yeah. But I think that would be driver. And then on this issue, I remember, there was a product 25 years ago called Timbersill that came out of the Northeast, I believe. The Northeast. And that was also a thermally modified product and was, like Green Building Product of the Year and hailed and all of it. And then after 10 years or so, it failed. I mean, really catastrophically. And so I'm just curious, are you aware of these previous attempts of the thermal modification?
Yeah.
Has the process changed? Do you know the history of that material or?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think that there are thermal modification has been around for a long time. It started in Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. There's kind of basically you can think about cooking wood like you can a certain recipe or something like that. And so each species of wood requires a different temperature and a different length of time, maybe different humidity, to create the thermal modification that's best suited for that wood that's going to lead to the least cracking or brittleness or anything like that. And so I think for a long time, people were only thermally modifying softwoods. And now there's kind of a movement into hardwoods. I'm not sure what that brand specifically used, but I know that when they were first starting to use hardwoods, they hadn't quite gotten that cook temperature, time, humidity correct yet. Like they hadn't refined that dial. There's an international organizational standard for thermal modification. And we work with one of the only companies in the US that has that certification. And so there are two certifications. There's Thermo S and Thermo D, and that's for stability and durability. And those are different, cook temperatures and rates there. But yeah, there definitely was, I think, a bad taste in people's mouth for a little while when thermal modification first hit the US because there hadn't been all of that testing done and on new species of wood. We have, done a lot of testing. A lot of time has also passed in the industry. It looks like I'm frozen. Can you hear me now? I think I froze there for a second.
We can hear you. I can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's been a lot of advancements, and we're not the only ones doing this. Arborwood is another amazing company that works on thermal modification. It's becoming a big thing in the industry, but I would, watch out. To your point is, anyone can cook wood and turn it brown. That doesn't mean it's thermally modified. And so make sure that if you are speccing thermally modified wood, you know what process this is they're using and that it is, the highest standard in materials and equipment.
That answers my question. Thank you. Because that's of course really important, and it sounds like you are 2.0 in this process. You know what you're doing. It's the next phase of thermal modification. Maybe one quick follow-up on this. The other thing, of course, and maybe this is later in your presentation, I would like to hear something about fire-resistant lumber, because of course that's coming. Okay, all right. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to jump into that.
Okay.
I'm actually not sure that I have slides about it because it's newer on our product list, but I'm happy to talk about it maybe right now. So we have two fire-rated products that are Class A. One is a thermally modified fire-treated pine. The other is a thermally modified FR-treated ash. And the thermally modified FR-treated pine, we work with a company called Chemco or Safer Wood. It's an impregnation process, and it, comes out, has all the testing. It's WHOI approved as well in the state of California as a siding. That has gone through the full process, has all the documentation, and then the ash has gone through all of the testing, has green flags all the way, and we're waiting for the certification back from the certifying body, but we can provide a certification of treatment at this time. And we're also one of the only products out there on the market that is a natural wood product that can classify as Class A here in California. Yes,
So
Tom.
traditionally, if we wanted to have a weather-resistant material on the exterior of a building, we would choose particular species of wood, red cedar, for example, or redwood. So it sounds like what thermally modified is doing is it's allowing us to have a wood
Broader.
exposed on the exterior from other species. So my question is the thermally modified wood a less expensive wood than the traditionally naturally resistant woods? In other words, if we use the thermally modified wood versus instead of redwood or cedar, are we saving money or spending more money? You're frozen.
Yep, I just switched over my Wi-Fi, so hopefully this should be better. The thermal modification process Can you hear me now? Okay. The thermal modification process is going to make it a little bit more expensive than your traditional cedar or redwood, but it is also going to give it more decay and rot resistance, by my understanding. We can apply the FR treatment to other soft woods. So we could apply it to a Douglas fir or a cedar. Redwood has some things in its makeup that doesn't make it a great fit for the FR treatment. But yeah, you have the option here of like, okay, we can use a traditional cedar. It still might cup, it still might bend, it still might twist, or we can go with a thermally modified option that we know has more of that stability and durability. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, I'm gonna move on unless anyone wants to jump in with any other questions here. Okay. So Donald, you had asked a little bit about what we do with our lower kind of grade material. And, I talked about the flooring on the Portland floor, that's stuff that ends up on the shop floor. There's also, fencing options here where, if a certain piece of wood, not all wood is going to be, one, some might be two, so, we're going to send that through into fencing. Here is some example of a thermally modified ash as a fencing material. Also thermally modified ash on the side of this home. And we're kind of in gallery mode now. So this is ash with a Q-Tech finish. And Q-Tech is an oil-based finish that is compatible with the FR treatment. And so sometimes I get questions from folks about color. They're like, we really want it to be Class A, we really want it to be wood, but the ash that you're showing here is way too light for the side of our house. What can we do about that? And so we have kind of some darker stain options. We also offer something called shasugiban, which is a Japanese burning technique that creates kind of a charcoal layer on the outside of the wood that makes it Class B. It's also really beautiful, adds some like pest resistance as well. And there are some other ways to kind of increase sustainability within the supply chain. I've talked a fair amount today about sourcing and just where we get our wood. But there's also things that you can do as an architect to promote less waste in the process. And so what I've shown here is kind of a standard call out for some maybe oak flooring. So we say white oak, FAS, quarter sawn, 6-inch nominal. And what I wanted to like walk you through is that, when we specify this, we're only maybe using 5% of a log. And that's because we're losing some by having it be, 6 feet. We're losing some by having it be quarter sawn. Let's see if I have this. There we go. So quarter sawn, is not the most efficient sawing method. Rifting sawn is even less efficient. It's the worst yield. What we do is something called plane sawn. And so you can see that when we plane saw, we get a little bit more character in the wood. You can see some of that grain come through in a different way. But yeah, we try and do that so that we can use most of the wood possible. And so something that I also try and speak with architects about is when you're working with clients, if you can, there's something about like, changing taste is a great way to, move us into more sustainable options. And so if we can say, change our appetite and want more, charactered wood, and like it brings more beauty and more story into the wood itself. So like just working with our clients to maybe change those expectations or pitch that in a different way. I have a little bit of a game that's usually fun in person, but can anyone tell me what wood or what tree they think embodies the most carbon or stores the most carbon in its wood and its body? Anyone? Just Shout it out.
Red oak.
Red oak. Okay.
Poplar.
Douglas fir.
Okay. All great guesses. Anyone else?
Juniper.
Thank you, Rachel.
Red oak.
Red oak. Great. And can anyone share really briefly their reasoning on why they chose the wood they chose?
Density.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Hardwood.
Yeah, Tamara, Nicole, it's the density and the hardwood. So red oak and white oak hold the most carbon in their wood and in their bodies. Because they're, yeah, the densest. You know, not all trees are also kind of created equal in terms of carbon storage and uptake. Deciduous trees have denser wood than conifers, and they absorb about 50% more CO2. So a lot of the other kind of like modified options you're seeing out there on the market, Kebony, Akoya, Luna wood, that's all pine, mostly from New Zealand. Some of our thermally modified wood is pine, some of it is ash, some of it is oak. And yeah, we're really just working to bring these materials into the market in a big way so that we can, yeah, supplant these other options that aren't as sustainable and that are coming from really far away. Another kind of part of this here is that an older tree will uptake a lot more carbon than a younger tree. And so when we're working with harvested models, it's often like, okay, can we grow this tree as quickly as possible, cut it down, like use it and do it all over again? And oftentimes that's done with conifers. But when we have older trees that maybe fall of their own accord, they've, you know, had much longer to live their lives and be part of that carbon cycle.
So I've heard that a lot of plant materials, and this is a good example, these two trees here, the trees are taking the carbon out of the atmosphere, and it's always a food source for them. So that almost suggests that, you know, to get more carbon out of the atmosphere, you'd want to leave the bigger trees alone.
Yeah, you would. You absolutely would. And that is, yeah, what we hope to do, but sometimes they do fall on their own, or they come down for, you know, reasons that are out of our control, like disaster, or pest damage, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, that's very true, Donald. And yeah, I think that's just, you know, the conversation I'm trying to have and usually trying to have is working with architects and builders to get them, you know, the wood that makes the most sense for their project in the most sustainable way possible, whether that's working with our wood or working with one of our partners. And yeah, there's lots of options out there in the market, and sometimes it's hard to tell what's really more sustainable than something else, or kind of like pull back the curtain on what wood is the best fit for a project. And I'm always here and happy to help with that. I kind of like to be cheeky about it and say I'm your wood guy whenever you need yeah, someone to chat through that with about a project. We're definitely, yeah, building kind of knowledge base here, building coalition, building yeah, just a space in the building and wood industry. And so if you can think of anyone else that would be interested in hearing about this or learning about this, like please feel free to reach out or connect us, and I'd be happy to speak with them as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just open up some time for questions and discussion if there are any. But thank you so much for having me today to present. I hope this was interesting and helpful. Yeah.
Gwen,
Have you worked with planners on different cities where they when a tree is removed and they require replacement trees, those replacement trees will take like 50 to 70 years to grow to the age of the tree that was removed. So have you worked with planners on, trying to create an equal substitution for the tree that was removed?
Yeah, I would say we've worked more with cities in the context of they have a problem with what to do with their wood waste, and we can try and help them solve that problem. We haven't worked as much on the replanting end of things.
Okay.
in the beginning, you showed pictures of downed trees, and you pointed out that there's a lot of trees that come down every year, and it's a big problem of what to do with all of them. what I'm curious about at the moment is, of those downed trees, what, how do they, how does it proportion out in terms of trees that can be used for building materials like fir and pine, or trees that have less use? So, I mean, of all those trees, is there an even demand for all the different varieties of trees?
Yeah, there's definitely not an even demand for all the different varieties of trees. There's a ton of trees that at this point don't have broad scale usage or application, but I think that's what I was trying to share with thermal modification and what I was trying to share with CLT and cross-laminated timbers, mass timber, is that we're trying to find ways to utilize these underutilized species. And so one product that I didn't talk a ton about was an interior product we call walnut. And what it is it's a maple. And maple's not, you know, maybe the most beautiful wood. You don't, if it does go in a project, sometimes it gets painted. But we thermally modify it pretty much for aesthetics only. It cooks the wood, it turns it darker. As an interior product, it doesn't necessarily need to be more stable, more decay resistant, more rot resistant. The thermal modification process does that, but in this case, when we cook it, it turns it this darker, deeper, richer color. And you end up getting something that's a lot more akin to a black walnut. So it's, you know, there's not an even appetite, but something that we're, you know, constantly trying to do is figure out, okay, what can or how can we work with a wood that may have been underutilized in the past, but could have a real role in the future.
You also mentioned that you're involved with cross-laminated wood.
Yep.
And I think I've probably used that because I think there are commercial projects, you know, we
There
use
are.
structurally, right? But I'm kind of naive. What is cross-laminated wood and how do you make it? And
Sure.
what wood do you start with?
Yeah, I'm going to start off by saying this is not my area. I mostly work in millwork, interior and exterior, but I do know a little bit. If you have a project and you need consulting on that, my colleague Charles is an expert here and has been working with us for about like 7 to 10 years. But from my understanding, cross-laminated, have you played the game Jenga by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay. For anyone that has, my sense is essentially like a Jenga block, where you have, you know, 2x4s that are this way, and then you have some that are this way. So you're crossing them in a stack, and then you're laminating them together with like a glue. And it's creating a super strong structural beam. The feed material, the stock that we start with, is either usually southern yellow pine or poplar. Those are two kind of common, uses there.
It's
Thanks.
basically a macro scale plywood. It's like plywood to the power of 10 or something like that. I have a quick question about what you mentioned earlier with the arborists dropping off
Yeah.
logs rather than putting them through a wood chipper. Do you know how this usually works? Do the arborists get paid for it, or do they
Yeah.
do it because they don't have to pay disposal or chipping? What's their incentive to drop it off?
Yeah, we do pay arborists for their wood. We tend to ask that they kind of stock up a truckload of wood before we come to get it, which does require a site to leave, you know, a log at sometimes for a period of time. But yeah, we have something called mill market, where they can sell their trees to us, and we can then have like an Uber for log that picks them up and brings them to a mill.
Okay, that's good
Yeah.
to know. And will you share this presentation or not? Is that possible? Or especially you had some like general big picture slides at the beginning, you know, that are really very informative.
Yeah.
Our firm, we've done a lot of straw bale construction, and so there's always these questions of, well, how much is there? How much can you take out of the natural world without depriving the soil composition and all of this? So
Sure.
it's a very similar thought process there as far as, you know, wood salvaging goes. And
Yeah.
for like wildfire damage, you know, if you go through these huge fire zones in, you know, in California where you have just miles and miles of sticks standing, is this being repurposed, or are you using some of that wood that is wildfire sticks in the forest?
Yes, to answer your first question, I believe this session was recorded, and
Mhm.
Sydney, will you send this out to participants afterwards?
Yes, it was recorded. It's going to be posted to our YouTube channel, most likely by the end of today, and I'll send a link out to everyone.
All right, thank you. So that answers that first part. The second part was about fire. We are definitely working to use post-fire burn materials. Like Donald was saying, not all wood is as there is there an appetite for all of the wood. So there is an identification process for sure of, what woods can we use and, in what quantities are they there and all of that stuff. But yeah, we have some folks working up in the Pacific Northwest on that.
All right. And back to the fire rating. So it seems that the thermal treatment of the wood does both. It does decay resistance and it does fire resistance, right? Or is there?
Not exactly. So the clarification there is that the thermal modification does decay resistance, pest resistance, rot resistance, but the fire coating is a separate process. That's we call it like an FR treatment or a fire retardant treatment.
And the FR treatment can be combined with the thermal treatment. So you do the
Yes.
thermal treatment to get basically the rot resistance established, and then it gets the FR treatment. This is a very hot topic, especially in Berkeley, like the Berkeley Hills. And, as they say, as Berkeley goes, so goes the nation. If it only were like that, right? So
Yes, I wish.
they did a very strict enforcement of the so-called zero zone within 5 feet of the house, where
Mhm.
basically of the lot line, where basically everything, there can't be any combustible material. So then it's a bit of a debate whether FR treated lumber fits the bill or not. I mean, is it still considered combustible, or is it just not? Is it just about the flame resistance of it catching fire? But this is a huge market. So if you
Yeah.
if you get that down, like this is exploding in all directions.
Totally. Yeah, I'm chatting right now with architect's office called Feldman in SF, and we're talking about some thermally modified pine siding on one of their projects. So it's new to market, and we're definitely looking for innovative firms who want to start using it.
Yeah, I'll be in touch for sure.
All right, thank you.
Quinn, I just looked in your website, Cambium Carbon, it's a fun website. It's really great.
Oh, fun is a great word for it. I would recommend checking out Carbon Smart Wood. We have 2 websites, and that might give you a little bit more about the material science side of things. The Cambium website tells you a little bit more about kind of our company and the origin as a whole than the wood products themselves.
Yeah, I would say that it seems to be in development because there's no catalog that you can sort of say, all right,
Yes.
here's the material, here's the price, this is where you
Yeah.
get it.
I
It's
would
more
check
like
out
you
the
can
Carbon Smart.
request samples and but then you have to request what the price is for that.
Yeah,
So it's
I would go through the Carbon Smart Wood website. I'm also, as West Coast Millwork Manager here, you can make any orders or product questions through me. I can bring by samples to you. I live here in Berkeley. So yeah, please, Sydney, if you haven't already, when you share the presentation, if you would share my contact information as well, that would be
Thing.
wonderful. Thank you.
thank you, Gwen.
Yeah.
I'm curious a little bit about, like in the Midwest, for example, there's sometimes the heavy winds that knock down like a whole forest of trees, like flatten it all in one
Yeah.
direction. But here in California, for example, they don't want you to pick up wood or take away habitat because of the debris leaves habitat. So do you guys balance that when you're collecting fallen wood?
We haven't done a ton of collection in California yet. Most of our wood right now comes from the Pacific Northwest and the Northeast and the South. I'm definitely, we're kind of newer to this market. We got here in February, so we haven't done a ton of on the ground picking up of wood yet. But if there's a specific circumstance here in California that you know of that, you're trying to get wood off the ground or something like that, we could definitely chat about it. But yeah, I haven't worked with that specific use case.
When I was a young boy, the family had some land up in the redwood country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent a little bit of time up there. I knew the roads, a lot of times they're just created by bulldozers. Maybe you're aware of this, maybe not. I'm not sure, but I have sort of read that one of the problems with downed wood in California is getting at it. And in order to get at it, you have to build logging roads for the trucks and equipment. And the process for getting an approved logging road past the environmental reviews is so laborious that they don't do them. And so the wood just accumulates and doesn't get hauled
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Again, not on our supply team. I don't know about those specific rules. I think for the most part, we're working with folks who have already collected the wood. Like, we're not the ones out there collecting the wood. We're saying, okay, you've collected the wood, you don't know what to do with it. Can we buy it from you? And so those aren't problems that our team is necessarily facing at this point in time. There may be a time when that changes. But for right now, we're working with people who have already collected it and stacked it and don't, need to find something to do with it.
Well, a lot of the lumber up in the Sierras these days has been collected because of the beetle infestation that we had up there, and so it was important to get that lumber out. And so there are times in which rules change.
Yeah, and I think fuel load reduction has been a big part of that. We did some work with Larimer County in Colorado as well, where, with all the fires coming through, increased fire risk, they used to pile up the wood and burn it during low fire times. But now the low fire window is like so small that they can't get to them. And so they have these stacks of trees that are sitting there like matchboxes, where if a fire does come through, it just, goes up in flames. And so, we did some work with them to, remove to deal with those wood waste piles and get those out of there.
Hi, Gwen. Thanks so much for your presentation. It's really nice to meet you online. And we work on wood utilization strategies for Sonoma County with an estimate about 48 million tons of material out there that needs to be collected to reduce wildfire risk. So really excited about your work and making the head roads into the markets. As you all know, as architects, there's actually quite a lack of in-state demand for California grown wood, and we could really use your help in growing those markets for our manufacturers here in the area. So are you working also with rural places? Sonoma is kind of a rural urban place, but just curious about kind of more of the WUI zones.
We absolutely are, and I would love to connect you with kind of our impact and supply side team if you're looking to move some wood. I think, I would love to hear a little bit more about your organization too at some point, and just kind of develop deeper connection. And I'm sure there's a lot of overlap in what we do. But we're definitely not just working with cities. That's kind of where we started. Because it was like a confined, zone. We knew, what that looked like, and we've really branched out into a lot of other sources. And then we, obviously distribute all over, definitely not just in cities as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Gwen. I guess I'll jump in here as well. Thanks for your presentation. I work at Stop Waste, which is a public agency in Alameda County. The legal name is Alameda County Waste Management Authority. And we've actually connected, I think a while ago, or maybe earlier this year, with some of your colleagues. And we're sort of starting to learn about the work that Cambium is doing. And it sounds like you're relatively new to this area. But I'm curious, I have a couple of questions. One is, and maybe I missed this early on in your presentation, but are you working with mills, or do you have your own mill locally in the Bay Area? Okay.
Not in the Bay Area. So in the Bay Area, we'd be working with partners. The mill that we own is on the East Coast. There may be a point in time in which we purchase a mill out here, but I think, when we can, working with partners is also great and fun too, because then we can, provide like local monetary, investment here as well. So we tend to work through a network of partners where, if we do have local redwood, we need it milled, we'll work with a local partner to get it back out, and I'll have that happen as regionally close as possible.
Cool, great. I also was wondering, we talk a lot about the like construction demolition waste stream, and we've done some analysis to look at like what is in that waste stream. And wood is not the heaviest, like
Yeah.
a lot of it's heavier materials, but there is
Yeah.
quite a bit of wood coming through, like clean wood coming through the waste stream, and a lot of it, does end up in the landfill. And I'm curious if it sounds like you're mainly focused on what is essentially, like you were saying, virgin lumber, like fallen trees
Yeah.
in the area, but whether you're also looking at or would be interested in maybe looking at the C&D wood that's coming through the C&D waste stream and finding higher and better uses for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely personally interested. I think that our company will expand into that eventually. There aren't any current streams for that I could just plug you into.
Cool. Yeah.
That being said, I do chat with architects every week, all the time. Sometimes they're looking for virgin lumber. Sometimes they're looking for some cool pickled, weathered thing, and so I would definitely be happy if and when I know that to like send them your way, or just communicate a little bit more about what exactly your processes are and how I could help support them. But we don't currently have any processes for that.
Okay, cool. No, that's good to know that there might be a shared interest eventually. And I think, we're kind of interested in connecting the dots between, like, as a local government agency, between the designers and, architects and the builders and the salvage and reuse.
Me too.
Yeah. So there's like all these different actors. And I think trying to connect the dots between all the actors and also the sources of, salvaged wood is kind of our dream. So it sounds like you're kind of a part of that, and there could be opportunities to.
Yeah, it sounds like me, you, and maybe Temra and some
exactly.
could get together and have a little meeting or panel. But I'd be really curious, who you connected with on our team and when. And I know that their kind of scope has evolved a lot in the last few years. Like they started by only working with cities and have now kind of moved out from there. So I'd be curious who you spoke with and about what, and if there's a desire to be reconnected in, I would try and get you to the right person for sure.
Great. Sounds good. We'll be in touch. Thanks.
I've got a quick question. This thermal modified wood, what is the process of modifying that wood?
Short answer, which is the most annoying one, is it depends. And it depends on the species. Let me pull up a note that I have on my phone because I get asked this question a lot.
So I can tell you in Arizona, you can thermally modify a 2x4 stud in a half an hour to where it'll come around and touch itself because it's so dry. So
I'm not even trying to understand what that means.
No, because what happens is that it's so dry in Arizona that you have to, when you unband a stack of lumber, you have to install that framing within 20 minutes.
Oh, that's
because
insane.
what'll happen is that it's so dry that the wood will just actually wrap around and touch itself.
Right, I see what you're saying. Okay, so yes. So what you're saying is that the cupping is so extreme that it'll warp and bend.
It'll warp right back to natural. And
gotcha.
And so how is this done?
So there are two, like I said, Thermo S and Thermo D. One is stability, one is durability. For the Thermo D, it is about 210 degrees Celsius for 36 to 48 hours. And then for the Thermo S, it is 190 degrees Celsius for that same time period, 36 to 48 hours. In these newer kilns. In older kilns, it might look different, but in the like high standard kilns that we just got one from Scandinavia.
And so you're strapping this lumber down to where it's not going to move, right?
No, not necessarily. You're putting it into a kiln and you're kiln drying it at super high temperatures with you're sucking all of the moisture out. So you're actually removing all the moisture, getting it down to about 7%, and then you're adding moisture back in later so that you're not getting a ton of cracking and brittleness.
So this is going in small batches then, because you're having to get the heat all the way around the wood.
Yes, yeah. And then you also can't we can't thermally modify a post we can only do like 1x6s, sometimes I think 2x6s, but you can't modify a post because it won't cook all the way through.
Right.
Is that helpful?
So 36 is, boy, that's not very ecological. On the short term,
Right,
at
the
least.
heat. Right, yeah. There definitely is, yeah, some energy process there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the wood itself is, yeah, just heat and steam, but heat, yeah, is an energy process, absolutely.
Thank you.
I look forward to when our whole energy system is solar and wind, but we are not there yet.
Well, for what it's worth, larger operations, they then use, like basically the cutoffs and all the little pieces that are used like basically like sawdust and firing a local power plant with it to run the operation.
Yeah, there's so many cool things.
Once you scale up, that's the possibility you can run it with your waste material.
Yeah, there's a ton of really awesome options out there. I love hearing about that. Thanks for sharing.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I don't know. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I really look forward to continuing to connect with all of you. Please feel free to reach out. Feel free to share my phone number as well. I think, yeah, there are a ton of incredible people working on this issue and this project, and how are we building a more sustainable future for ourselves here in California. And yeah, I'm just excited to know all of you.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much.
absolutely.